In this episode, my guest is Mike White. Mike hosts a number of podcasts on film and television, including the excellent podcast, The Projection Booth. Projection Booth episodes cover the production and background of films and often feature interviews with writers, actors, and directors. Mike also has several podcasts that focus on television works like Columbo and Kolchak, the Night Stalker. You can find links to his work in the description below. Welcome, Mike, to this discussion, and I'm glad to have you here. I have a number of questions that I'd like to pursue with you.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, very excited to be here on the Quixote podcast.
So I
I
have
love Brazilian podcasts so much.
so I have so many questions for you, and some of them relate to film, and some relate to just the fact that you are a podcaster and you talk to so many different people and things of that nature. But I want to start with film, and I have an idea of how I think of film, but I'm curious, when you just think of film overall, what what do you think about film? Like maybe its place in culture, or just what film really means.
You tend to think of it as a reflection of the culture. I mean, I think all great art reflects culture in some ways. I mean, you can always try to make things in a vacuum, but it's being made by humans, especially a lot of humans. I mean, so many films. I mean, of course, there are exceptions where it's just, experimental or people that are kind of a one man band type of thing. But there's so many people involved with so many films that I think everybody adds a little bit to it. And especially the time and place that they're in. Um, yeah, that's usually what I think about when it's just thinking about film overall. I enjoy that reflection of our culture back to us. I especially like when other cultures will reflect ourselves back to us. I think about things like spaghetti westerns, where it's like this is a genre that is inherently American with the whole idea of westerns, but to see what the Italians or the Europeans were doing with that same structure, but giving it a European flavor, giving us our own stuff back to us and reflecting us back to ourselves through the lens of the spaghetti westerns, or as the Japanese call them, the macaroni westerns. I mean, I'm very excited about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that is fascinating to think about. First, they have to see us and to develop their perception of us, and then they pick out what's important to them or what they notice, which might be the things that are different from their culture, and then they have to recreate it to the best of their ability, which they won't necessarily be able to recreate everything, so there are going to be substitutions, and along that chain, you're going to get a lot of interesting like layers of change.
Yeah. And it's always fascinating to see that. And then even just, looking at, well, especially like lower budget films from like well, any era, but especially for me, like the 50s, 60s, 70s, to see it feels like the truth really comes out when you don't have that budget to hide behind, and you get to see smaller films made by scrappier people and sometimes people with really big agendas, and to see what they had to say all the way from a Sam Fuller to oh gosh, what's that guy's name who made the Rich Ormond, or I can't remember the first name. The guy who made If Horsemen Tire You, What Will Footmen Do, or any of those like really crazy Christian films. Guy had an agenda. He wanted to do things with his films, and I mean, even up to like somebody like Neil Breen, where it's just like, all right, I'm so curious what makes you tick, and I'm trying to figure that out through your art.
Yeah, I mean, well, I want to go back to something you said before, but let's put a pin in Neil Breen and that field. Something you said before hits on exactly like how I think of it, which is the fact that so many people go into film production, and you you can draw a line, maybe it's a hazy line between something like a novel, which is almost universally the work of one person, and they can shape everything and they can control everything. They just have to write it. They don't have to like put it on screen. So
Right.
the limit is their imagination, and it more or less it comes from them, despite whatever they might be inspired by. And then you have film where even on a small film, I mean, I guess it's a question of what counts as a small film, but on a small, large film, you have a lot of people, dozens up to hundreds and thousands on bigger films, and all of them are putting in their little perception of something. There's not this ability for one person to control everything, and even on a small set, the director cannot manipulate the actors like mind reading robots that do exactly what he wants. They're still going to bring whoever they are to it, aside from the fact that they just are who they are and they look like themselves. So
Mhm.
there's a degree to which the film, I think, could be seen as a kind of monument of like humans getting together, building something, and just the structure of it is that the monument travels to wherever people are, but it has this lasting ability that we can look back in the past and we can see these people made this thing. And we get to see the actors, but we see names of other people and we know that they're there.
What's interesting too, because you think about movies being made right now where you and I are aware of what's going on in the world. We're aware of the baggage or the reputation that an actor or actress or even a director or a screenwriter can bring to a particular project, DP and any of the roles where you can really see the work. But you think about like, oh gosh, this movie has Kevin Spacey in it, and oh, he brings all of this baggage to it with him. And then you think back to movies from, say, like the 1930s, and unless these stories have perpetuated themselves through the ages, there might be actors, actresses that were cast for very particular reasons, maybe not just because of their talent, but because of the reputation that they are bringing to these stories. But unless you're, really well versed in those things, you probably have no idea. They're probably, it's like watching old cartoons, like old Warner Brothers cartoons, one of my favorite things in the world. And you see all of these references and you're just like, okay, I have no cultural touchstone to what you're talking about. And sometimes years later, I'll figure it out. And other times it's just like, I don't know why you're doing this particular thing. I don't know why that's supposed to be funny. I don't know why this particular person is in this role or what their outside life was supposed to bring to this and that we're supposed to glean from, oh, you cast this person, well, you're going for, the scandal that was around them because of X, Y, and Z. And I kind of like that time washes away some of those sins, but at the same time, it's like, I would really like to know more of if you had these intentions, it'd be great to know that. And that's where, obviously research and study comes into it, but nobody knows everything.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Looking at those cartoons, I've seen the same, images, and people will say, "Oh, this person, this character that they've drawn is really this actor,"
Right.
and you're like, "Oh, okay, so," and and then you're like, "Well, this actor was known for this role, and they're dressed this way in this scene because it's referring to them in this movie." It's like, okay, I get that, but why? Like, why did they make that reference here? Like, what was the motive? What was someone going to get out of that in the context? And sometimes you can figure it out, but yeah, there's got to be a lot of nuance and cases where it's like, oh no, it was really edgy that they put this in because of his reputation at
Right.
the time. It's like not necessarily lost, but lost on me.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I would love to meet the people that understand all of those references, but yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's even possible because there's a degree to which we're still going to look at everything from our modern perspective and we're going to be who we
Exactly.
are. And it's going to be like, oh, so that was a scandal back then. Yeah, well, that was back then.
Right, right. And oh, and then scandals, things that were scandalous in earlier times might not be scandalous now, or vice versa. There might be things like, obviously, we look back at certain characters, certain actions in movies. I was doing a commentary for a movie over the weekend, and the main male character slaps the main female character. I'm like, well, I don't know if that was okay in 1976 for that to happen, but here in 2024, this I'm automatically against that person and automatically think, oh, you're a horrible, horrible person for committing any sort of violence against a woman, but okay, maybe that was fine at the time. Who am I? So I'm bringing my own baggage to things.
Yeah, it's very difficult not to at least casually see someone do something that I or we these days don't approve of, and relate to the idea that, oh, that was fine back then.
Right.
I I personally find it difficult because when I look back into history, I don't see things changing that much. There's a degree to which maybe the specifics of whether or not hitting someone was allowed uh, have varied, but you can always think that, well, hitting someone like randomly and unnecessarily and excessively and things like that were always considered pretty bad, and it's a question
Unless
of
you're the
what.
Three Stooges.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a question of what are they trying to portray and things like that. What do you think in terms of, because I know that uh, in terms of research, you do a lot of research and you've read a lot of the book versions of films. What do you think really, yeah, can't be filmed or what gets lost? Because people are always talking about, unfilmable books, and people try, and
Mhm.
sometimes they do remarkably well. Um, so I'm curious how much you think gets necessarily lost in just the process of not necessarily making it a film, but involving other people. Like, there's going to be an actor portraying this role, and they're going to bring their opinion, and maybe the stars align one day, and everything just works perfectly the way the author imagined, but usually not.
Yeah, there are some books that are almost too slavish to the details and just, you're like, okay, you can do something different. It doesn't have to be exactly the book. I think that's where I like David Lynch's Dune better than I like the Villeneuve version of Dune, just because he goes off and he does different things. But as far as what's unfilmable, I don't know if anything is truly unfilmable. I mean, there are situations, things where we might not be able to, utilize special effects in order to visually capture something, but even then you can, do things symbolically. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's anything that I would consider truly unfilmable. Even when you think back to things like, Johnny Got His Gun, like if that was a book, the idea of an inner monologue and someone who's there with no arms, no legs, no vision, no anything, you get everything that's inside of his brain. You can still get that through voiceover, and you do, and you get memories, you get flashbacks. So just because a character is limited in their mobility doesn't mean that we can't explore the entire world. So yeah, that's a really good question. I would like to turn it back to you and see if you think there are things that are just unfilmable.
I I don't think that there's things that are unfilmable. Obviously, there are things that we would just choose not to put on film, I guess. Um, but we might be able to convey what happened in another way, just like the book managed to. Uh,
Mhm.
but what you just said, it reminded me of Derek Jarman's Blue, and it's like
Oh yeah.
if you can have a film that is basically 100% inner monologue, then you can basically just read a book and call it a film. And so there's definitely an escape hatch there. There's also I was thinking of Blade Runner and how there's this reaction to the so-called film noir version with the voiceover,
Mhm.
which is negative, and I'm not really certain why, because there's a degree to which the voiceover is providing explanation that's necessary, was provided in the book, and people seem to dislike it as a matter of style, like, oh no, I don't want film noir in my science fiction.
Right.
I don't really hear people say, "Yeah, I don't like to hear people talk, or I don't like the film explained, or I don't like to know what's going on." It's always sort of this thing of, it's not appropriate for a reason that doesn't make sense to me. So I think part of what makes that unfilmable is a matter of taste, and maybe in a specific genre at a specific time, people don't want a film that would be like the book. They want a film that would be like other films and like what they expect things to see or what they expect to see. So it's like with Dune, it's, I want action in my action movie. I want spaceships in my sci-fi movie. So give me those things. Don't give me complicated philosophical discussions about humankind. because that's not what I'm here for.
But that's what film offers us, the whole idea. And I know you're not disagreeing with me. I know you're stating that, as a this is the attitude of some people type of thing. And I agree that attitude is definitely out there, but thank goodness that you can use film as a medium to explore all of these different things, to have a completely philosophical science fiction film that talks about issues that we might or might not care about, but somebody cares about them enough to put them down on film. And yeah, I really appreciate that film doesn't have to adhere to just genre and just those conventions. I mean, that's where the fun really comes in for me, is how you play with those genres and you play with those conventions. And yeah, give me a give me a film noir western, give me a film noir science fiction film, give me a film noir, I don't know, heist movie. Well, that's pretty easy, but go ahead, like mix them up. Let's see what you come up with.
Yeah, I mean, genre is something that I find interesting because there's a lot of crossovers between genres and a lot of great films. The films that are the peak examples of a genre are usually the ones that are really different from that genre in substantial ways. And we look at them and say, "Oh, that's great," precisely because it's not like the other films in the genre. It did something a little bit different that arguably put it outside the genre, but at the same time, we can see the clear connection. Uh, I'm also curious, nothing of a good example of that off the top of my head, because I'm curious what you think are some of the best adaptations that have been made in terms of a film being true to a story or true to authorial intent, maybe something that conveys like what it would be like to read the book without necessarily being exactly like the book. The one that I
Oh
always
boy.
think of is Catch 22, where there are substantial, huge deviations from the story, yet at the same
Mhm.
time, the film has moments that are almost better than the book.
Oh yeah. Well, I would definitely put like LA Confidential out there, which is radically different from the book. And but yet both of them are just fantastic, in my opinion anyway. I love both the book and the movie, though they are a lot of times in name only as far as the similarities. But you have those basic building blocks, but the way that was it Helgeland and Curtis Hanson put them together was so different than what Elroy was doing. And I can see where people might hate that, but for me, it was like, oh, this is fantastic. It's like he gave them the toys and they put together the Lego set in a way that he wouldn't have put it together.
I wish I'd read the book.
It's a great book. That whole LA Noir quartet is fantastic. Black Dahlia, which is way better than the movie. Trying to remember White Jazz, I believe was the fourth one, and I can't remember what was it, Hollywood Homicide. I can't remember what the other one
Mhm.
was, but yeah, all of those are great, and they all speak to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I I've watched those films from that era as well, and they're definitely exciting and interesting. Um, it's it's at a place where I can enjoy them more than necessarily get terribly invested in them.
Hmm.
There's a certain kind of uh, almost as if they're putting on a show. Like I understand that this is mysterious and there's murders and so forth, but I don't feel terribly dramatized by it. It's not really connecting to me on that level. It's more of a unraveling the mystery kind of thing,
Hmm.
where I see them as puzzles sometimes. I guess I'm wondering if the book conveys more of a personal connection to these things, that you get more invested in what's happening.
Um, there was definitely a little bit more, like especially of the Ed Exley character. You get more of his backstory and what he did. He's portrayed in the movie as being very virtuous and all this, but then when you find out that well, he was scared shitless in the war and ended up, I believe, hiding under a pile of dead bodies in order to save himself. And so you're like, well, maybe that's not as virtuous as the Ed Exley that we see is, but that gives him a little bit of a chink in the armor. But you already can see that chink in the armor, I believe, from some of the things that they do in the film. So it's a different way of showing us that he has foibles, um, just not told in the same way. And I have to say, too, as far as the film version, we're talking about all those people that bring things to it. Jerry Goldsmith's score for that was just Goldsmith. I'm blanking on the name. That's right, right?
I think so.
Yeah, he just brought an amazing talent to that. And then, yeah, all of these great actors, especially these amazing Australian actors that I didn't know who were Australian at the time, like Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe.
Hmm. You're just sending me off on a tangent to see actors young or earlier in their career, and then to think about like their later career, and oh, this is who this person is or what they're known for, and to see them absolutely far before that. It's
Oh, yeah.
like that, along with like film in general. There's a kind of time travel aspect that we do get to easily see uh, how people behaved, and what was considered appropriate, and even in just like the way that they act in the film, sort of a more like theatrical style in the past that has arguably become more natural these days, though I don't necessarily think that people in films are talking the way that people actually talk.
Right. Oh no, never. I wish I could be as clever as some of the characters that I enjoy. Yeah, and it's interesting too because when you think about the time travel aspect, and I love that term for this, the whole idea of we're living right now, we're living in our time, so we get to see people like a Russell Crowe age, any of these actors aging up, and we get to see how they change, how the roles change, what they bring to these roles. But then you look at somebody like a Humphrey Bogart and it's just like, that's it, you're trapped in amber. There is no films before this that we can see because you didn't make those, and there's no films after this that we can see because you're dead. But we get to see that whole body of work and then see how they change, as opposed to, oh, the new Bogart film is coming out. I
Mhm.
can't wait to see what he's bringing to this role. I mean, of course, with artificial intelligence, maybe we'll see that one day, but I hope to God we don't.
Yes, I was about to say the same thing, and it says something about about the world now that we both think that thought.
Oh yeah. Well, I think we already saw a Humphrey Bogart come back in a commercial. I want to say, I know we saw. Oh gosh, was it Gene Kelly? Somebody, or was it Fred Astaire? We saw one of those guys dancing in a commercial with a vacuum, I want to say, and then we saw Audrey Hepburn on a, I want to say maybe a Vespa, or maybe it was just from that film, like in another commercial. I'm like, oh gosh, why do we keep doing that? I was just thinking of the film Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow the other day. Don't ask me why. And I was like, oh yeah, Laurence Olivier's in that movie. A young Laurence Olivier is in that film. People don't talk about that movie nearly enough, and especially how freaking creepy that was.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
It was interesting. It was one of those first movies where it felt like it was made entirely in a computer. There are live action actors. Jude Law, I believe, is in it. Angelina Jolie is in it. But the world that they live in is as what was that? There was a movie about Nazis on the moon, like Iron Sky, I think it was called. It's like they live in the Iron Sky world. Like everything is computer generated, and so you can have like giant robots and all of these crazy things, and you can bring back Laurence Olivier.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's an excuse, and I don't really know why people would do it. It doesn't seem like it's cheaper, really. I mean, surely it's cheap enough to get a person there, and what's the name draw for that, or why do it?
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you get to see when they do it poorly, like or Ian Holm in that Alien Romulus, or even, I know some people swear by this, but that Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One. Oh my God, just shoot that poor man from the back. You do not need to show his face, his creepy, uncanny valley face.
But then you're making me think in terms of like this kind of reuse of stuff that there are also like the good ones, like Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid,
Oh
where
gosh, yeah.
there's like an homage and an understanding and contextualization and you just understand that we're appreciating the past as opposed to just stealing from it, I guess.
Yeah, or even something like Woody Allen's Zelig, and to see him injecting himself into the past in that way, and you compare that to something like Forrest Gump, where you're just like, okay, yeah, this is just weird stunts and like horrible overdubbing of John Lennon. This is strange. You don't have to do this, honestly.
What do you think? Do you think there is a real difference between that? Is it the fact that people approach it with like passion and sincerity and respect for the material, or is it just happenstance of like what was popular and in demand at the time, and no matter how much someone tried, they wouldn't be able to make a good reference from a certain place.
I don't. I know with Zemeckis, he's always pushing the envelope and trying to explore new areas of technology, and that was definitely probably something that attracted him to Forrest Gump was this challenge of resurrecting or inserting Tom Hanks into all of these scenarios. He already kind of did that with I Want to Hold Your Hand by having the four Beatles in that movie, even though they weren't in that movie. I love what he does at one point. He has TV cameras set up in the foreground, taping the the Beatles in the background, and the camera hit the movie camera that is shooting I Want to Hold Your Hand is moving past these TV cameras, and in the little TV viewfinders you're seeing the footage of John Lennon, the footage of Paul McCartney, and then in the background they are completely blurred out as if just the projector, just the cameras are in focus. I'm like, that is so super clever, and I love that he
Mhm.
did that. And it's so less ham-fisted than things like the fake LBJ type of stuff. And I know that he's probably pushing and wanting to see what he can do, but sometimes it's like maybe things aren't ready, and then other times it just feels, and it's not everybody's opinion, but it feels to me like just a stunt. I'm like, oh, you were just doing this to see if you could do it, kind of like Polar Express. It's like, why are you subjecting me to this nightmare fuel with this? Just keep it in your basement.
I can think of some people, like I guess Ridley Scott comes to mind, where I tend to wonder if things are being done just to see if they can be done or see how far a boundary can be pushed
True.
or just I don't even know what it is, but without a solid core underneath it where they know what they're doing and they're confident and they not only know what they're doing, but they also understand that they're working within the film language and the understanding of the people around them, and maybe they're trying to tell a story and they're going to get the story told, or they're trying to deliver a message and they're going to deliver the message. But often as not, it seems like a lot of things are just technological excursions, or we made a really long film and we cut it down and these are the pieces that we're going to show you, or
Yeah.
there were a bunch of rewrites for various reasons, and the result is kind of a here's a thing that you can watch for an hour or two.
Yeah, that's the thing I don't understand about Ridley Scott is just they put out the movies that he's done, but they put them out in compromised versions. Eventually, he gets a director's cut on DVD or Blu-ray, and you get to see what he really wanted to do. Most of the time, those are way better than what was put out at the theater. So I'm just like, give this man more slack. Just let him put out the version he wants to put out. But that takes us all the way back to the beginning of this conversation where I like the voiceover version of Blade Runner better than what Ridley Scott came up with. And Ridley Scott not allowing the audience to hold two ideas in their head and just insisting now, like and you might as well go in and digitally put in a neon sign with the word robot and an arrow pointing at for Deckard here for Harrison Ford. This guy's a robot. You get it? You get it? And it's like, No, he might be, he might not be. That's the fun of it, Ridley. Come on.
Yeah, definitely. It takes away, as you say, the fun, the mystery, the playfulness, the
Exactly.
reason to engage with the material and explore the world and see what was this here for and what was this here for, and yeah, maybe it turns out that it was just a quirk of production that someone left a coffee cup on the set, but
Right. Yes, exactly.
but you know, it goes back, I guess, to it circles around this question of, you know, authorial intent and whether or not films even have authorial intent, and if
Hmm.
that can survive the production process. And it seems like sometimes, and I don't think it's necessarily related to a firm director who sees themselves totally in control, but to sometimes just having a cast that all like works together and understands and rehearses and becomes familiar with the material, and they get a sufficient sense of how it's all going to play out, that they are able to create that collaboratively without one person having to tell, you know, specify everything. Because often as not, if it's just one person specifying everything, they may think that they're like putting together something that's going to convey that message that they have in mind. But because they're just one person and there's dozens or hundreds of other people around them doing things, they can't keep an eye on everything. And you know,
Right.
they can't afford to reshoot the whole film if there's something wrong.
Yeah. As you talk about that, my mind goes to Alfred Hitchcock, where I'm just like, it feels like every single thing that's in the frame, every single thing that the actor is doing is being directed. And you think to yourself, there are no mistakes because this guy was behind the camera. But that can't be the reality of it because there were so many people on those sets. And these were, of course, he was working with a lot of the same people, but not always. So not everybody's swimming in the same direction. So yeah, I'm sure there are definitely things that are in those movies that people like me glom onto, and they probably just are a mistake.
You made me think of animation because, you know, obviously in
Oh yeah,
animation, everything is there because someone wanted it there. No, nothing came on the paper. Uh, and yet still things creep in that are unintentional or they're mistakes and inconsistencies. You know, there's all sorts of things that don't fit. Plus, there may not be a coherent directorial view of things. And, you know, I don't want to get into the world of anime and animation, but you know, it's just as messy, even when you're not dealing with the real world. I'm also reminded of Sling Blade, and I remember on the commentary track, he's explaining how, you know, the color red does not appear in the movie because he was making this deliberate choice, except for this one scene where a red car drove by and they were just stuck with it.
right.
And so it's almost like, yes, this whole movie is about this one red car by accident.
Yeah, gosh, that was such a good movie. What? Why not more movies from him? Like he's a great actor, but I thought that was a really well directed movie too.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of work out there where you see it and you're like, I wish this person did more, but then I also wonder, because I see people who do more, whether or not we're asking someone who has one good novel in them to write a second good novel. It's just not going
True,
to happen.
true.
And you know,
I have a feeling that he directed more than just Sling Blade, but I only remember that one. Um, but yeah. Oh, I'm looking it up. Sure enough, yeah, I forgot All the Pretty Horses. I've never heard of these. Daddy and Them, The King of Luck, and Jane Mansfield's Car, and it looks like an episode of this TV show that is in Goliath,
hmm.
airing tonight. No, I'm just kidding. A David E. Kelly joint.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I go and look at things people have been in, and I start to wonder how many of these things people are just in low budget or small scale films that you never hear of, for just, it seems like Hollywood is just in the business of making films, and they're going to crank some stuff out for union reasons or just keep people employed or just because they have nothing better to do with the money and maybe they'll make a profit on it. Not everything seems to be striving to be a work of art, uh, or even like a real film that will ever like be distributed in a normal sense.
Yeah, that whole product word that I know some people really chafe against. But yeah, I mean, You look at somebody like The Asylum, where they're making just those real quick knockoffs, and you just wonder how much passion went into this, if any. Was it just completely for a money grab? And usually my answer is yes. You look at Atlantic Rim when Pacific Rim came out, or Snakes on a Train, any of those kind of things, and you're just like, all right, like, how quickly did you put this together? Like, did you they must scour the trades and everything and come up, see these titles and then start to plan stuff out. I would hope a few weeks in advance, but they're always there. Like, as soon as the movie is out at theaters, at least back in the old days when there were video stores, the videotape or the DVD would be there available for you. And so you'd have the divorced dad coming in. Oh, look at Atlantic Rim. Hey kids, we've got Atlantic Rim at home, that thing. And it's just like, I'm going to be the hero. And then he puts it in. This kids are just like, what is this garbage?
Yeah, it does seem like that is a valid genre though. Uh,
It is.
of the complete rip off, deliberately bad movie, and uh, certainly people like Red Letter Media have made a small career out of making fun of bad movies. But they make the point that there are certain movies that you can't make fun of, because if you're trying to make a bad movie and you make a bad movie, it's not interesting. It's not fun at all. So,
Right.
but I guess there's a kind of consistency to it where people know what they're going to get. And if you get used to it and you've watched some, then it's like, okay, guys, let's get together and watch the new one.
And sometimes something good sneaks in. I remember, Sci-Fi Channel is notorious for their movies. Think of the Sharknado series and things, and they would do all of those, Pythonator versus this or that, or all those kind of things. And they had one years and years ago called Mammoth, and it was based. What's it sound like? A woolly mammoth comes back and attacks a bunch of people, but it felt like it knew what it was doing, that it was really winking at the camera, but winking at the camera in a really smart way. It wasn't just, like, kind of giving a, well, that happened kind of a reaction to everything. It really felt like they understood the assignment, and they're just like, oh, we're making this really silly movie, but we might as well make it entertaining as well. That one I liked so much that I actually tracked down the DVD, got it for $1 at a Dollar Tree or something, and I'm like, yeah, this is worth it. I think that this was a great film.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, sometimes you see people who go on to great careers working
Oh yeah,
in less than less than great movies. Romeo and Juliet obviously comes to mind.
yeah. Or what? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, was it, with both McConaughey and Renee Zellweger?
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing about the young actors, is seeing them in what are quote unquote trash movies, or
Right.
just things that they would never be in these days, either because they wouldn't, or because just people wouldn't let them. It's interesting to see that part of them, to sort of round them out. But at the same time, I'm curious about you, but I personally don't like knowing anything about personal lives of actors and directors, or anyone really. I don't want that coloring to be brought in when I'm watching something, because I prefer to
Hmm.
be able to just completely invest in something. I want to see the character, not the actor. Uh, but at the same time, and this goes to you as a podcaster, like, you have so much connection to film and film production, and the people involved. How do you think it colors your perception of film to, yeah, essentially be so much of a film junkie, quasi insider?
I definitely would not put myself as an insider by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, once my subscription to Entertainment Weekly ran out, like however many decades ago, I kind of quit with the gossip and the trades and all this stuff. But obviously, it sinks in, right? It just creeps in from everything, especially from social media, where you're just like, oh, this is what this person is up to, and this is what this person is up to. It's so funny because I don't know who's married to who or who's dating who, but somehow, God help me, I don't know how she knows this, but my wife knows who is dating who, who's been married to who has how many kids, for all of these celebrities, I'm just like, how do you know this stuff? It's wild. So I'll be like, oh yeah, there's somebody named Blake Lively in this movie, and she'll be like, oh, you idiot, that's so and so's. Is it Ryan Reynolds? I don't know. Who's yeah. Anyway, and I'm like, yeah, why would I know that? Why would I know any of this stuff? Um, I don't know how much about knowing about the people's lives does color my opinion, but I'm sure that it must. It absolutely must have an effect on all of that. Yeah, I'm trying to think because I kind of agree with you that I would rather not know sometimes, if not most of the time. It helps, especially when it comes to like more problematic type people where you're just like, oh, I'd really like to check out this Mel Gibson film, but I'm having a problem doing that. So yeah, if I didn't know that he was a Holocaust denier, it'd probably be a lot easier to enjoy his movies.
I'm curious, like, not to put you on the spot to defend an ethical position, but where does that come from? Because I can understand people who make arguments that, well, I don't want to go see such and such a film because this bad person's in it, and I'll be supporting them financially or something.
Hmm.
And even that's questionable because it's not necessarily the case that their compensation has anything to do with how many people buy tickets.
Right. Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
it's you may or may not know that for a fact at any given moment, but it's one of those things where you're gonna have to put a lot of effort in to even find out. But sometimes it's like, okay, like say Mel Gibson, pretend it's 200 years from now, and you're looking back
Mhm.
on a Mel Gibson film. Would you be like, oh, he was a Holocaust denier, like 200 years ago? Would it
Oh,
matter then?
well, that's the thing that I was talking about with the people trapped in amber and these things where there may be actors that have been cast where they did horrific things that they were well, I was just thinking the other day, like hearing the story of Tom Neal, the male lead from Detour, the Edgar Ulmer film, and that he ended up murdering his wife, or at least allegedly, let's just say allegedly. And it's like, okay, does that color what I think of Tom Neal? No, not really. I don't think that will be hanging over my head the next time I watch Tom Neal in a film. But yeah, but the Mel Gibson stuff I do know because I lived through it. So it's that does hanging over my head and kind of overshadows. And I guess it is by degrees because there are certain things where it's just like, oh yeah, I can watch this Roman Polanski film, but I'd rather not watch the Woody Allen film. So it's like, I guess it's my own morality looking down my nose compass.
Yeah, I think there's an element that definitely comes from like our emotional response to just the fact that we are seeing a person, we know who they are. I mean, that's always going to be there. And then I guess it's a question of to what degree can you, even if you want to, that's the first step. But if you want
Hmm.
to, then how much can you like, just set all that aside to then try to appreciate the character. And even
Right.
that calls into question whether you're appreciating the character or the performance, and the performance is the actor, and so it's still the same person. But yeah, sometimes I think it's easier than others. It might depend on whether or not the role is inherently one that's not a normal person. Like there are some
Hmm.
people where either they're in heavy makeup, or it's just a kind of very science fiction role where that that's not the real world. But if you see someone who in real life turned out to be a domestic abuser, and then a film playing a domestic abuser, it's like, well, what am I separating?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. 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 It definitely pushes buttons and probably it's a lot of uncomfortable places that these performances take us as well as the actors inherently take us.
you
And I would rather not go on those journeys if I could and just not know anything about the person. And now it's kind of nice for me, like, as I've grown older and as I've matured and things, like when I was 18, I might have been like, oh, isn't it weird that that actor's gay, but they're playing a hetero role or something? And now it's just like, you know, an actress comes out and it's just like, so I don't need to know that. Let them do their own thing. I don't care. And it doesn't affect my interpretation of their performance in any way. You know, you look at like Ellen DeGeneres in that Mr. Wrong movie, I think it was, and it was just like, oh, I'm trying to get married. I'm trying to get married. And I'm like, at the time, I'm just like, why are you trying to get married? It's obvious that you're a lesbian, you know, and this is before she came out, but I was just like, you're obviously a lesbian, lady. Maybe look there first before you start calling all these other guys Mr. Wrong here. But, you know, like that was a very particular time, a particular place. Now, I don't know if I'm what the only thing that I might get quote unquote embarrassed, and I won't even quote unquote that because I'll get slightly embarrassed, but there's a lot of times where I'm just like, well, how am I supposed to know? Like, I'm trying to remember the name of the person that was the Charles Xavier's sister in Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's just like, oh, yeah, she did a really good job, and then somebody's like, well, they, and I'm like, oh, their pronouns are they. Okay, cool. And I always hate being corrected, even though it's a good correction. But it's like, well, how am I going to know their pronouns? I don't pay attention to these people. I don't care. And I'm just trying to, yeah, just stay separated from their personal lives. Where it's just like, yeah, you are your performance. You're nothing else to me. You're a figure on screen, which is always that weird, like disconnect of like I've talked about this on my show many times before, where sometimes I'll see somebody die in a movie, and I just think that they're dead, like forever. You know, just like, oh yeah, yeah, JT Walsh, he shot himself. It's like, no, you idiot, that was A Few Good Men. You know, it's like, yeah. So, and I'm sure there are actors today where I'm just like, oh yeah, that person's dead. It's like, no, no, they're still alive. They just died in the movie, Mike. But sometimes that crawls in there, and I just can't dislodge it.
Yeah, it's very hard to separate sometimes the language around the pronouns of the character and the pronouns of the actor when you're talking about performances
Right.
and nuances and so forth. And it's definitely one of the easier places for it to just all get messy and difficult, um, to even be clear.
Oh yeah.
I,
Well, and then people change too. You know, it's like I haven't gone back and watched Hard Candy, but I'd be curious to watch that now after Ellen Page has become Elliot Page. And that was, you know, a little odd for me having seen Elliot grow up. And then I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, this whatever. Great. That's fantastic. But it took me a little bit to be like, I've seen him as a woman in these previous movies, and there's that disconnect too, as far as like, do I say the actress Ellen Page, but the actor Elliot, or like when I refer to the older roles, how do you do that? And it's kind of an interesting calculus that we're just going to have to figure out as we become more accepting of other people's genders and pronouns and those things. It's just like, okay, well, this is presenting an interesting uh challenge when it comes to even just the English language.
yeah, and not to digress into it too much, but it seems like one of those things where the solution creates new problems where you would almost want to have, oh well, a special pronoun that is referring
Exactly.
to the past tense of a transition, but the moment that you do that, then it's like, well, now you're not just using like the pronoun that they want or something. So it's, yeah,
Right.
we can
Yeah.
fix, yeah, can't fix everything.
No, no. Well, because I get very confused just because they them is plural. And I'm just like, I was talking with one of my coworkers once, and she's like, well, I had a conversation with them and blah blah blah. And they said, and I'm just like, how many people were you talking to? I didn't realize that was just one person. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, that's like, even like it's funny because some people will say like my partner, you know, like there's one friend that I have who never says his wife, his girlfriend, is this, is that. He's just like my partner. And I'm just like, it, when I first heard him say my partner, I was just like, is that your business partner? Like, who are you talking about? And I'm just like, oh, well, there's partner and then there's partner. And it really doesn't matter to me if it's your business partner or if your life partner. And it doesn't matter if you're not telling me the gender either, but it's just like, okay, yeah, this is interesting because it is a gender neutral term for somebody that you're involved with, and I've heard other of my friends also use it, and I'm just like, but I always go to business partner first, and I'm like, don't know why that is.
Yeah, same. I think it's because when that word was being developed in my brain at an early stage, I only heard it in the context of business partner, like or
True. Yeah.
we're partners on an expedition, or like whatever. It was just two people that were partners, and it had
Yeah.
no implication of anything romantic or anything beyond a certain like task even.
Yeah.
Whereas now we have, we're on the edge of saying heterosexual life mate, or something else equally
Right.
silly.
Really narrow it down. Yeah. My cis female. Yes.
But
But yeah, I had a friend of mine who was having a real hard time. He's just like, these kids with their pronouns, kids with their pronouns. I'm like, you sound like an old man. You better shape up, or I'm not going to deal with you anymore. Accept these folks. This is what they want. Do it. So
I want to go back to Neil Breen as
yes. Oh, good. I'm glad you still had that pin there.
as an example of someone where definitely we know things about the person, and there's arguably no difference between the person and the character, other than maybe his abilities. Thank God. Uh, but when you watch something like that, I think it raises a question, and maybe I can compare it back to Blue. Like you can look at Blue and say, the minimum necessary to be a film is just to be on screen, maybe. Like, just it's a color, there's some sounds. I mean, people are talking, but you could imagine a, a very, very minimal film and still thinking that's a real film. That I can understand why that would even get an award for being a film. And then there are other things like a Breen film where you kind of wonder, is this a film? Like, yeah, yeah, someone shot it, people are moving around in it, but does this qualify? Is this achieving enough? And you know, a child's home movie, like we tend not to think of that as a film. They're not getting put into IMDb, though I was shocked to find out that tens of thousands of new movies are added to IMDb every year, and to
Wow.
a lot of them can't be that good, but
No.
but but I wonder, like, where are the limits? Like, what is and isn't a film? And I certainly don't want to set up any like rules and say, this is what a film is, and you're not allowed to call your thing a film, or you're not allowed to make it. I'm all for the creativity, but I don't know really that we well, I'm curious, like, where you draw that line, if you can, or what you think of about what makes a film.
You know, I don't know. I you're talking about all of the new things being added to IMDb, and a lot of that is YouTube series, podcasts. There are certain fan groups that will like post every episode, like, oh yeah, the new Red Letter Media had this, and Rich was in this one, but no, just in credit only, or blah 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 blah. And it's like, okay, those are those films. I mean, you could project that in a theater. You could put it on a wall. It's got sound. It's got motion. Yeah, it's interesting. Like as you're talking about Neil Breen, I'm just like thinking of the most minimal film that I could think of, and I'm just like, well, what about Empire? The Warhol film. Like it's just how many 8 hours I think of one static shot of the Empire State Building, and you get clouds moving, you get wind blowing, you get the sun moving, since it's such a long film. I mean, how is that better than what Neil Breen is doing? I just have such a soft spot for his stuff because it just feels like you're cracking open the man's skull and looking at all of the muck that's inside of it.
Yeah, it lacks a certain skill. I mean,
Oh yeah,
the skill of acting is not there, but
camera work,
it
editing.
yes, almost everything. But I guess maybe it has good writing, or at least interesting writing, dramatic writing.
Interesting, yes. Yeah, I mean, connecting like space Jesus with the mummy and just all of those things. I mean, yeah, it's sometimes it feels like well, it's not really a Jack Chick tract because those were very wordy, but just that idea of like somebody who would hand you a handwritten magazine about how the international banking community is taking over and we'll all have to wear the mark of the beast soon. Like feels like the guy handing you that in the subway is the cinematic equivalent of Neil Breen, where it's just like, what is on your mind today, Neil?
I'm reminded I can't remember the name of it, or at least I'm not confident that I'm remembering it. Do you remember that film where it's a bunch of people in a cabin and it turns out one of them is Jesus? Essentially, he keeps claiming that.
Man from Earth?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Like that feels very close to a Breen film in many ways. Yet,
Mm-hmm.
yet clearly it's better acted, it's better structured. But is it better written? Maybe not.
Yeah, it's a lot of ideas talking to each other. It's like four or what, five characters in search of an author type of thing, where you're just like, you are this one thing and that's all you will ever be. Is, well, here we're debating this in this cabin and eventually we'll come all to the same conclusion. Yeah, it is an interesting, what is this movie? Have you seen the sequel?
I have, but I don't remember it. I've seen the original one like 3 times, and I only saw the sequel once.
I'm in the exact same boat. Yeah, we actually did an episode on that one forever ago, and I had never heard of it. It was my podcast partner at the time turned me on to it, and then yeah, I got hooked up with the sequel at some point.
Do you remember what happens?
No, I have no memory of it. I know I watched it because I was curious, and I also wanted to see how many Star Trek characters came back.
It's interesting that that movie like is clearly attempting to like have a deep philosophical conversation. Maybe it's at least trying to like do something more like that than Dune is. Uh, and one, I can't help but wonder what the more recent Dune films would be like if they really had tried to not necessarily be exactly like the book, but keep the tone of the book, keep the interest in the mind and the interest in the ideas more than just
Mhm.
the action of the fighting.
Yeah, that would have been. I mean, it is interesting that, to go back to the Lynch version, the whole idea of the inner monologue. I mean, it's so there on the page, and we're talking about that whole page versus screen thing, to include those thoughts, that you hear those thoughts and are so close to each character. You're literally in the head of all of these characters. What an interesting way of approaching that, when you just take that internal and make it external. And I were there voiceovers? I think there were some in the Villeneuve version, but not nearly used as effectively.
Yeah, I seem to remember them only saying what happened, not
Right.
characters, not inner monologue.
Okay. Yeah. Ironically, as I was coming down to the basement to record, my wife was watching part two, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. I'm fine podcasting now. Thank you."
Have you read Dune?
I have. It's been a long time, and then before the Villeneuve movie came out, I listened to it on Audible. Um, and I have to say, I forgot how long it is, because I am so used to the David Lynch version, even the 3 hour David Lynch version, where you get that many years pass, or like in 2 standard years, this happened. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
Have you seen?
wow.
I don't know if it's that version or maybe there's a different version that's longer, but there's the one that opens with hand drawn sketches of the past.
Yeah, yeah, that was the originally in the TV version of it, and now it's even in some of the fan edits that I watch. I think the Spice Diver edit now has the paintings, and I'm like, these are cool production art, and I'm glad he switches out that sonorous male voiceover guy and actually gives all that VO. I think almost all the VO to Erlon with
Mm.
that.
Yeah, that's much better.
Oh yeah, way better. Yeah, God, I wish. I think that Spice Divers fan edit was so good. that it actually got released on Blu-ray with Dune. Was it in Germany? I think it might have been Germany or Australia. And I'm just like, that's amazing to have the fan edit being released legitimately.
Yeah, I, I'm just thinking about how they handled the legal rights around that. I guess it's
Right? It's crazy. I mean, if you've got the rights to the TV version and to the theatrical version, and they're still digging up footage. Dune Info, I think it is, or Dune.info. The gentleman that runs that site has a YouTube channel, and they just uncovered more footage of I can't remember her name, the handmaiden to Lady Jessica, the woman that basically helps raise uh, um, the sister character. Shoot, I can't remember, but yeah, brand new quote unquote footage from one of the actors, and might be that actress, has a assembly cut on VHS, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, there's still going to be more things that can possibly be mined out of that.
it's it's fascinating to see how much effort people put into reconstructing
Oh yeah,
that that movie in particular, given the history of it as being like, oh, Lynch didn't approve of it, and it's like you would expect people to, well, maybe if a director did something that they did approve of, that would be why people don't go about reconstructing it. But it's very strange to just see how much effort people
yeah.
put in to trying to connect to the best version of the Dune story, particularly when because I'd asked if you'd read Dune. Did you read any of the sequels?
I definitely read uh, Do Messiah, but I don't think I ever made it past that. And that's probably been 20 years since I read Dune Messiah.
Because the story definitely like continues and goes in odd directions. I always
Oh
recommend
yeah,
reading at least the first four books. That's sort of the big story. And when Herbert was writing it, he originally wrote the first three books more or less as one book, and then sort of split it up to achieve a normal publication size. And I'm simplifying that a lot, but basically he intended for the first three books to be read together, and
hmm,
and the story like of Dune is very much the upward hero's journey of like Paul becomes emperor. Yay, good guys win. Let's go home into the
right.
movie. And the second book, spoilers, uh, goes down a lot, like really,
Oh
really,
yeah,
really a lot. And the there's not a sense of like a hero in that. And so I've heard that they're making like a third modern Dune film that's going to go in that direction. And I could see from the end of the second one how they're setting up like, ooh, things might not go well. So maybe they're thinking about telling that story, but it's such a non-movie, such a non-Hollywood heroic story
oh
that
yeah.
that I wonder whether or not there is. I think there's an. I think people would be interested in seeing it. I think that there's a lot of greatness in it, but it's so different than what Hollywood is used to making. Because Dune, like there's almost no way to see the Dune series other than the first book in isolation as heroic good guys winning. It's again and again sort of ups and downs and tragedy, and the good guys losing ultimately. Um, at the end of like a couple of books, they end with the main character going down, and that's hard to put into film. Like we can have
Oh
like
yeah.
Empire Strikes Back, and that stands out in film history as like this rare, unusual thing. We don't tend to see a lot of like films where the good guys don't win, and I think that the modern version of Dune really like dug into that and simplified the story down to just be an action story of the hero winning.
Yeah, of course I think of the story that took so much from Dune with Star Wars. And you would think that those first three movies would be really fascinating to see that downward trajectory, because that is, for me, obviously it's a much different thing. We don't see Anakin Skywalker turn into a giant worm or anything. But yeah, it's like I wish that that story had been good because I think I would have seen more hope for this third Dune movie. So yeah, I'm afraid that they're just going to clean it up. You see those flashes of him as that killer, as the man who's leading the jihad, but we still, even where we're at right now, even with the ships leaving and being chased away or shot out of the sky, you're still just like, okay, yeah, he could be a good guy. And yeah, like you're sitting there since you've read all the books going, no, you're gonna be very disappointed.
Yeah, yes. Well, especially if they stuck to the book structure and it's like, okay, it's many years later, jihad's over. What?
Right. Yep. Yep. Funny.
I had another thought though, connected a bit to Breen, but also just film in general. There's a bunch of weird films out there that I think are definitely films, but I certainly couldn't start to draw the line of like what makes this a film versus something else, because they're things with arguably no story or minimal story and minimal everything. Rubber comes to mind. I mean, it's
Oh yeah.
it's it's such a fun film, and I think even more of a fun
Yes.
film if you like film, because it's so reflective on the film itself, and it's so unusual and it's so strange, and it's just delightful to watch this really weird thing in a way where you could never make The Asylum Rubber. Like, I,
Right.
I say that, and yet I know it's possible, but you would never want to make it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what they would do instead. Like, would it be like a donut or something else round, or would they just go for a different type of wheel,
I,
perhaps?
I'm thinking a tire with guns.
Oh gosh. And I can see the cover art in my head. It's rolling down, but the you can see at least two guns, one on the top, one in the middle, and they're firing wildly. The sky behind it is orange because everything behind it has been burned to the ground.
Definitely possible.
Yeah.
But
Oh
I'm
yeah.
curious,
Let's do it.
what you think about like Rubber, or like when you
I
think of
love
weird films like
rubber.
that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. Gosh, yeah, even some of the bad experiments where you're just like, why did you do this? Like, yeah, like Empire, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not sure why you would do this, but yeah, push the form. And I like those. I mean, his films especially, but even who is it? Carre, the guy that did Holy Motors. Yeah, I love when people are just pushing the envelope and making these absolutely bizarre films. I mean, I am so tickled that a film like Hundreds of Beavers actually found an audience. I mean, what a phenomenon that is. I see Hundreds of Beavers listed everywhere, people talking about this. And I'm like, when I saw that movie, I thought it was going to be me and five other friends that got this movie, loved this movie, thought it was just the best, and nobody else in the world would ever know about it. And that it has gone completely the other way. I'm just so happy that weird movies are getting liked and getting seen by audiences.
Well, perhaps I can make your day. I've never heard of Hundreds of Beavers. Tell me about it.
Okay. Oh, you will be so happy. Hundreds of Beavers. It's almost like a video game playthrough. Uh, you're watching a guy, a woodsman, trapper up in the wilds of Canada, I believe, or Minnesota, and he kills a raccoon. He takes it to the trading post. The guy makes a hat out of it. He gets a hat. He kills a squirrel, comes back with that. The guy makes like a coat out of it. He gets the coat. So it's like leveling up. And then eventually the guy sees the shop owner's daughter, and it's just like, I want your daughter's hand. And the guy's like, you can have my daughter's hand if you bring me hundreds of beavers. That's probably 20 minutes into the film when the title actually shows up, and everything plays out as if it was a Looney Tunes cartoon. uh, the beavers and the squirrels and the foxes and all these other animals are people just in costumes walking around. It's all in black and white. Again, talking about things being done in a computer. The almost the entire movie was generated in a computer, but it looks fucking fantastic. You cannot waste any time. We should probably sign off right now so you can go watch this movie. It is so good.
No, I'm definitely sold. The first film that came to my mind when you named this film was Zombievers, which is also really surprisingly good.
And now that one I haven't heard of.
It deservedly has gone under the radar. It's a horror film where basically beavers attack people. It's a cabin in the woods kind of affair, but with zombie beavers. It,
All right,
it's
Zombievers. All right,
it's delightful trash.
from 2014. Okay, all right. Wow, looks like these special effects look legit. Oh, and it's on Tubi. Thank you, Tubi.
Yeah, it's well made.
That's
It's well
great.
made, well acted, and deliberately funny. So it ticks the boxes that I like.
It's your mammoth.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's definitely that kind of thing.
I love it.
Question about like maybe your past. Um, how did you? What was your experience? And maybe I'm not. You don't have to go into like too much detail, I guess. But I'm curious about your experience of like approaching film from like whatever age you were when film just seemed to be sort of the way that we get introduced to it. Of you see like children's films at first, and then at some point you see good films. The films that are everyone's going to, and then at some point a lot of us make a turn and we start being like, oh, there's maybe foreign films or indie films or something unusual. And a lot of people clearly don't get into foreign films. They're like, oh, I don't like subtitles, I don't like reading. People won't be into indie films because they'll say rubber is weird, as if that wasn't the point. And and some people like seem drawn to these things and some aren't. I'm curious, like, when did you find yourself drawn to films, and to what degree did you find yourself going in a direction of like kind of wanting to see all the films? Or are there any film genres that you look at and you're like, oh, that's trash, I just won't watch that?
Well, to answer the last question first, I don't think that there maybe mumblecore, maybe mumblecore. But even amongst mumblecore, there probably are some films that I might like. But yeah, no, I don't think there's any genre. I'm thinking of the video store in my mind, and I'm just like, no, there's probably stuff from every single section in here I would be able to rent and enjoy. As far as when I started to feel that pull, I mean, movies were kind of my social outlet when I was in high school. It was going to movies, and then eventually with VCRs, being able to rent movies and bond over movies, be able to watch things repeatedly. Because before there were VCRs, it was watching things on uh, HBO and the movie channel and Cinemax and Showtime, and seeing these movies play out again and again and again until they kind of feel like they're the fabric of you. But even before that, I mean, when I was 5 years old, it was just like I couldn't get enough Star Wars, going to see it multiple times at the theater. Eventually, it comes on like pay TV as a special event, and then eventually it comes to VHS. And yeah, you can just watch it as many times as you want. But yeah, I think it was probably high school when I started to really feel the pull because of renting movies with friends, watching movies, digging into the they had a shelf at Blockbuster, and I can't remember what it was. I think it might have just been called Cult or something. And just going through those movies and finding incredible things. Finding Herschel Gordon Lewis that way. Just different filmmakers, and then eventually going to the black exploitation wall, and that's where I just really fell in love with movies and fell in love with film. And then once I got to college, that's where I got the fever for foreign films. Because I know I had watched movies with subtitles when I was youngish, like in my later teens, but I really honestly can't think of the first time I ever saw a subtitled movie, or when I consciously said, this is a foreign film. I was pretty rote when it came to stuff I liked in high school, and I can't think of anything. But yeah, when I got to college, that's when I got to see like one of the first movies in a film class I ever attended was watching a Bergman film. I had never I think I'd heard of Bergman, but I had never seen any of his work. So I was delighted to be able to experience that. And it was the rare Bergman comedy. So I got to see a foreign comedy as well, which always amazes me that humor can translate so well from culture to culture and from age to age.
Yeah, I mean, you immediately remind me of like the ancient Greek Roman plays and
Oh, yeah.
how completely contemporary they are. Like nothing has changed. We find not exactly, but basically the same thing's funny. The same tone, the same timing. They might have hammered the point home a little bit more than we would, but certainly not more than the Three Stooges might.
Yeah.
There's very very little that's changed in the long term sense, and then I think film, a lot of the differences that we see in film just reflect mood or technology or these fads. Like I immediately think of the what is it, the orange and blue coloration fad that like sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
show up in movies everywhere for a little while until people were eventually like actually sick of it.
Right.
And yeah, I kind of think of like what would a historian think looking at that? They're like, these people really loved these colors for a little while.
Yeah. Why was Mexico always tinted orange or yellow?
Yeah, I'm curious from your point of view, did you have people around you who were all that way, or did you? Because my experience was one of like, I could not again tell you when I first watched subtitled movies, but I got into foreign movies and I liked them. And I remember other people saying, "Oh, I don't want to watch that. It has subtitles." And they definitely did not want to watch it, and they weren't going to. And I I'm curious like what your experience was in terms of like other people being that way, or if you ever yourself like had a period where you were like, "Nah, I'm not really into that."
N- I was very, very fortunate. So it was a great experience for me in college where basically didn't know what the hell I was doing. Went into a guidance counselor. They're like, "What are you interested in?" I don't know. "What do you like?" "I like movies." "Okay, I'm going to put you in this humanities 232 class with Hugh Cohen." "Okay, sure, whatever." So I had that going on in my life, seeing movies that I'd never seen before that way. And right around that same time, well, I guess maybe when I was more like 20, so shortly after that, I got a job at Blockbuster, and it was a very, very hip Blockbuster. It wasn't the main Blockbuster, which was really art house, but this was a very hip Blockbuster. And our foreign section was amazing. And what was fantastic was that the guys that I lived with, just pretty much white bread, all American dudes. I still am in contact with almost all of them still today. Just love these guys. They were down for whatever. I could bring home any movie and I might watch it alone. I might have one guy in there with me. I might have two, three, four, 10, all of the guys in the house sitting around watching, I don't know, Kurosawa films, watching Almodovar films, which was great. Like all of
Mhm.
these, I guess, straight white guys just sitting around watching these Spanish, very provocative Spanish films, and nobody flinches. I'm just like, this is great. So that support from the friend base, I think, was very helpful. And they eventually were to the point where it's like, oh, hey, there's this interesting sounding movie playing. Why don't we go see it? And it's just like, yeah. Or they'd invite me to the last year in school. They Some of them thought that they were going to get a blow off class, and they took a film class, because film classes are easy. And then they took this one called Evil in Cinema that Ira Konigsberg taught, and they suffered in this class, and especially because they had to watch these literally evil films every week. He made them watch Showa, dude. All of Showa. He
Oh.
made them watch at the movie theater. They had a thing going with the Michigan theater, and they had to sit in that theater 2 hours at a time watching all of Showa. Man, it's amazing how people think that film is a blow off.
Yeah, yeah. I, that's a lot to watch. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I,
yeah,
I would almost question whether we're watching film or we're watching history. I mean,
yeah, yeah. It's up there with Empire again, where you're just like, time moves as you're watching the. There's so many movies where you're just like, you get outside and you're like, oh wow, it's still light out. Okay, wow, I felt like I was in there for days or whatever. And then there are the movies where you really feel like you've been there for days, like, or you might actually be there for days.
though to be fair, I mean, in the modern era where we all sort of binge Netflix series, and we've gotten used to the idea of, oh yeah, I'll just sit down and watch these 10 episodes. The notion of a film being bad because it's long, I don't think.
Right.
But yeah,
It still happens though. People still bitch about it. Oh my God, The Irishman's 3 hours long. And why is that a problem for you?
yeah, it's interesting. I guess it goes to a question of whether you think of films. Um, it really gets in because Netflix, you aren't watching in a theater. You sort of know that you're watching at home. The format gives you permission to watch it any way you want. They've basically said, yeah, we're going to cut this up into 10 chunks and feel free to stop there. Um, whereas a film in a theater, yeah, you can watch it at home, but you're probably going to judge it as if you're supposed to watch it in a theater, whether you do or not. And that might be fair. Yeah, sitting for 10 hours in a theater would be annoying.
Yeah, I've done it. I've done it.
One of the things that I think of, like we were talking about film as a human collaborative thing, I think on the one side of the production side, there's that, but then I think that it's also true on the viewing side. And, this notion that you can cultivate a capacity to appreciate different films by like watching a lot of different films and appreciating like the changes in time and the different foreign perspectives, all the stuff. I think it gives us the ability to both appreciate more of the world because we see all of these things reflected and we see more things in the films, but also we're then able to talk about things more. I think that film works as a kind of higher level language. So it's like we speak in words, and then I can also like show you a picture, and we say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we understand this idea. And then I think a film is what, worth 1,000,000 words, or it's not even that. It's conveying things that you can't say. Often
Right.
when we're trying to have a conversation, we'll say, well, here's a hypothetical, like, imagine there's a train track and you get to throw a switch and kill one person or five people. And we're just sketching this out, and we're sort of hoping the person envisions it the way that we do, and we're not providing the details. But if we have a film and we get to watch for 2 hours as, action hero man has to just throw the switch, then we have something that we can all look at objectively, more or less, and sort of say, yeah, like in that scene where he did this, I would have done this. Or we have a way of communicating about something that is just too difficult to say without that film. And I think the more that people expose themselves to a wider variety of films and they share those things, then they have that common vocabulary, and you can say, oh yeah, how was your day? It's like, oh, it was like the end of Patton. Like,
Right.
like I don't know exactly what I'm saying there, but I'd be saying something to someone.
Sure. Yeah, you could hold a gun against my head. I couldn't tell you what happened at the end of Patton. So we're on the same page there.
It's funny because I remember what happened in the sequel. He dies at the end.
Oh, okay. Patton 2,
Yeah, yeah.
Electric Boogaloo.
Patton 2 is it's not bad. They bring back George C. Scott, but it's just sort of the how he managed things in Berlin after the war and him dying and stuff of that nature. It's good, but it's such a a big difference between here is a film that was shot using the latest technology with a great story and incredible effort put into it by so many people, and then here's a TV movie. Yeah,
Right.
even with the same actor, it just is so incredibly different.
Oh God, think of that shot of him in front of the American flag.
Oh,
You know, and how that fills the screen, and then you look at it on a TV screen where it's 3 by 4.
yeah, and that
No.
that flag scene, like that's like an element of language. Like there are times
Oh
when
yeah.
you're talking to someone, you're like, hold on, you just show them that scene, you're like, that's what I mean.
Right.
Ah, yeah. I'm curious, just as a question that popped in my mind. You know, it's the end of the world. It's a disaster. You get to save like 10 movies. I'm not going to ask you which ones you would save. That's a silly question. But would you save weird movies or would you save more normal movies? Like, would you preserve things that like are just extreme and at the edge and the fringe of what film could do, or would you be tempted to go more for things that are, like this is a really good romance or this is a really good action film that's just very conventional?
The with this scenario, I would probably pick comfort movies just because I don't know if I'm going to be alone, if I'm going to be able to watch them. But I would probably, even just to have them and know that somebody has them safe, I would be taking comfort films. So, the movies that I grew up with that I loved, Black Shampoo or Orgy of the Dead, things like that. And then if I had room, I'd probably pick some movies that I think are just incredibly well made. I would have to go for the one that everybody would pick, probably with Citizen Kane, but I would want to take that and maybe The Godfather just to have look at how well made these films are.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, Mike, I appreciate talking to you. This has been wonderful, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you. This was a real pleasure.